So, one new PR this week that I saw uh, is actually really interesting looking for people that are interested in backfill and recovery performance. Um, I don't know how to say this user's name. Jan, maybe? Uh, they basically are looking at a very narrow situation where it's you have a new OSD, and they require a full copy from a primary OSD, and if that primary OSD's PG log entry count is smaller than the OSD min PG log entries, then it thinks that the new OSD can be recovered by PG log. And it turns out that it's much faster if you have it handled via recovery via backfill rather than via recovery, just because of all the extra work that goes into recovery. So it's super interesting. They provide a whole lot of data and analysis in there. So I think Miha is going to take a look at it. But yeah, it's pretty neat. Let's see. There were 4 that I've got that were closed. I think this TTL cache for the manager got merged into another this other feature, which I think I need to go track down. But in any event, that was closed, and now has been merged into something else. This async messenger frames message header optimization, header decoding optimization, that got closed in favor of new PR. This OSD compression bypass in favor of RGW compression, that got merged by Casey. And then the Adams BlueFS fine grain locking PR got merged by Kefu, but it looks like it's probably causing locked up failures in testing. But I think Adam said in another PR that was like a weird interaction or something that isn't maybe really a failure. I don't remember the details, but he's on it. He's working on it. Okay, let's see. 3 updated PRs. Let's see. For the MDS, there was a request to provide like kind of an overview of that subtree removal PR, kind of like a high-level documentation, and that just was provided recently, so that's there now. I think there's just some concern about how big that PR is. There are 2 librd optimization PRs that were recently updated. I think those just both needed a rebase, and there was at least 1 bug fix that went in there too, I think. So I guess Ilya will have to re-review those. And then that's about it. Did I miss any PRs, guys? All right. The only things I've got today are a quick note that Jeff Layton submitted some fixes for the kernel clients that we think may resolve the 3 gigabyte per second throughput bottleneck that we've observed previously. It looks like we were grabbing a mutex that we didn't really need to grab, and he's worked it out so that he can use spin locks instead. So at some point here, Ilya is going to review it, and I'm going to try to do some testing on it. That should hopefully provide a nice performance boost. And we'll see if it gets us up to like the 8 gigabytes per second that we see with librd and libcephfs. Not totally sure if it will or not, but that will be the goal. So there's that. And then the other thing I've got is that so GDB PMP has been useful for a long time, but it's not quite as useful as it used to be. it's now causing, and has been for a little while, our classic OSDs to basically brick when using it periodically with high thread counts. You can use it fine if you've only got like one TP-OSD TP thread, but once you have more, which we do by default, it can cause the classic OSD to brick pretty quickly. So its value has diminished somewhat. Still works fine for Crimson, actually, interestingly, but not for classic OSD. So Adam, a while back, had made a version or a similar wall clock profiler that used libunwind. He did some really clever things with parasitic code injection that actually makes it very, very fast. But the code is pretty complicated. And I don't know, Adam, if I remember at one point you were having some issues, but I don't know if those have all been resolved, but it sounded like at some point it was kind of a little flaky still.
It was problematic at some point of time. Then I fixed ptrace attach procedures, and then it seemed to work fine. From now on, I didn't see any problem with that. Except, of course, the architectural and philosophical problem that there is that very clever, in a bad sense, injection of the code into other processes.
Yeah. Well, I will say though that your version is much faster than anything I've come up with so far. But I'm working on trying to have the best of both worlds. So I started working on basically a port of GDB PMP to C++, replacing the GDB part with libunwind as well. And it's both faster and works better than the GDB version, but it's not as fast as Atom's. So I started digging into libunwind since of course, one of the first things I did when I got it working is to profile the profiler. And it turns out that almost all the time is spent getting process name. Libunwind is rereading stuff from disk over and over again. That was partially mitigated by utilizing some caching that they have built in, but not fully. So I started digging through the libunwind code and identified the code where it was happening, and even tried fixing it to some extent. I've got a branch of libunwind where I go in and I'm trying to cache parts of parts of the code where it was not utilizing the cache previously, but it's not really helping that much. And as far as I can tell, libunwind is now a dead project. The mailing list, no one got back to me. The project maintainer didn't get back to me after a week. No one is submitting code really. I think the last commit was maybe in spring. So it's pretty. If it's not dead, it's definitely backburnered. So we have people at Red Hat actually that are working on ELF utils, and they have their own method for unwinding things, libdw. So I abstracted the backend for this thing, and now we'll be able to use libunwind and hopefully soon libdw as an alternative, which is both supposed to be faster and is better maintained by people at Red Hat and actually other people as well. So that might be the right way to go. But the good news is that this is actually working now, and it's better than GDB PMP was. So it's certainly an improvement already. I think if we can get the sampling fast enough, we can start doing some really interesting things with maybe looking at trying to match sample periods with things that are happening in the OSD. Maybe if like RockCB compaction kicks in or scrub kicks in, we'll be able to like look at sampling periods that correspond with those events and things. But that's out in the future. Right now, I'm just trying to get this working as fast as I can. And so that's really all I've got. This is maybe going to be a fast meeting. But I do see other people have showed up, so I'll open it up. Anyone have anything they want to talk about this week? Adam, I might pick on you a little bit since you were talking to me earlier about the BlueFS locking things. Were you able to confirm that it was kind of a false positive?
Yes, and I fixed that. Really, that was always because of our log depth feature is actually a symbolic feature, meaning if you have two different objects that basically have the same mutex of the same name, it is interpreted as the same mutex. So if you have two logs to the different objects in the same thread, it will always complain. And that was exactly what was happening. Hopefully, I was able to fix that, but I suspect that there might be cases in future where we would get false positives from log dep that are not really solvable.
Okay. Well, at least you were able to fix it in this case so that it doesn't throw those in testing.
Yep, I did one change that made sense, meaning reordered logs in the same way in all the place of code. That made sense. It just meant switching order in compaction. And in addition, I had to exclude compaction from other log, which just didn't make sense, but it was not a problem, so I was fine with that. So that's why I was saying that maybe in future it will be difficult to actually get that working in different locking schemes.
And Gabby, I'm going to pick on you a little bit too. It looked like maybe there's been good progress on figuring out what was going on with the allocator changes.
Sorry, so what was the question?
Oh, I was saying I was picking on you a little bit. It looks like maybe you figured out how to fix the issue with the allocator changes.
Yeah. So there was a problem with hybrid allocator caused probably by my code. I found a problem which could explain this corruption. Unfortunately, it's now impossible to recreate it because there seems to have been some change in the code somewhere else, so this issue doesn't appear anymore. The problem was that when I saved the allocation information, if there was a corruption in the file, but when you open the file, you still got the file without failure, then I would start loading the allocation into the allocator. At some point, I would recognize that there is a corruption because of CRC error, and then I would fall back and run a full recovery using the same allocator. So some allocation information appeared twice. I fixed this issue now that I'm using a temporary allocator when I'm reading from the file, and only if and when the whole allocation was found to be in good shape, I'm loading this into the real allocator. So that should solve the problem, but in the last few weeks, this issue disappeared. We cannot recreate it. I suspect that maybe it could be one of two things. Either the tests are not as, or changed somehow, and they are not as aggressive as before, so this corruption or this failure is not happening, or that Bluestore code was modified and it's now able to better recognize corruption in a file. In theory, it should never happen. In theory, Bluestore should recognize if a file is corrupted and not give it to me. But that's everything is just theory now.
Yeah, Adam mentioned that. Oh,
that's
go
why
ahead, Adam.
I'm so interested in actually trying to replay that problem, because having found an error in BlueFS files consistency would be a great news for me. That would at least put a hope that some errors that we see in the field regarding reading and from corrupted SST files could be attributed to this error. But yeah, that's still a theory, as Gabi said. We don't know. That needs to be verified.
Adam, did you find out anything more if it was possibly your locking changes that now made the problem disappear?
No, we tested that with Gabi, and also before locking changes, we couldn't reproduce it as easily as earlier. So
okay.
it did vanish even earlier.
Okay, interesting. Are you guys going to?
It could be few other things. The error that my fix addresses is if the file somehow got internal corruption. So it could mean that in the middle of the write, if I open the file to write and the write is long enough, and in the middle we kill the system, that would happen. But if you change the test, for example, and the allocation information would be shorter, such as single write would include the whole information, you would never see this problem. You need to have big enough system. So I don't know if anybody changed the test, for example, and if before you would have, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of allocation information, and now you got only like 1,000 of them, which could fit in a single write. I think I'm writing up to 4K allocation information in a single write. So you get it all or nothing. But if you do more than 4K, then you could succeed the first one and fail the second one. If there is, it's like a race issue, but it could happen. So if the test was modified, the size of the system was shrink, that could explain why you don't see this issue.
And
the problem we found is real. It's a real problem.
Fully relevant because BlueFS is still buffering that 4K chunks that you're giving to it. And unless the file is longer than 1 gigabyte, it will not flush it to disk. It will just has it as a very long buffer list, not flushed. So that couldn't even be that.
Okay, but it could be something around this. If the timing for flashing would be modified, flash would happen earlier. Actually, sorry, I take it back. Adam, I sent sync request in the end of my write.
Oh, you in the end or in
yes.
each chunk? I thought that only in the end.
Not after each chunk, just in the end. No, but I'm saying
in the end. Okay, yep.
If
That's
all the allocation information fits in a single extent, in a single chunk, then I would do a single write, sync immediately, then I get all or nothing. But if I do multiple write, then if I'm crossing the sync point, the system might start flushing the data, and eventually when I get to the end, I'm going to miss it.
Yeah, it requires inspection.
Yeah, again, everything is just speculation. We could create this issue once. Did you commit your change? The one about the sanity check, which was you had when in debug mode. Is this shared committed? Remember, Adam,
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Remember when I was running restart and I was failing because of a problem in some aggressive sanity check you added. At the moment, I cannot write data using restart if I'm compiled under debug mode.
Oh yes, that's fixed. There's a PR. It's not committed. It's still that's the logdep issue from BlueFS fine grain logs.
Okay, so I can write an internal code in my Ceph box. I got this huge allocation information having like 500 million extent, so I could insert some assert, not some force abort or set myself sig9 after writing say 100 million extents, and then we could see if BlueFS is going to reject the file on startup. Do you understand the suggestion?
Yes, that's something.
But all in all, I think we figured out the issue. I was combing the code back and forth until we reached to this one, and I tried various changes, and all of them show the same behavior. So I'm pretty confident that that one should address the problem. But there might be some other issue in BlueFS we need to figure out. But I think the code should be safe now. And maybe we should also add a test to tautology with big allocation. I don't think we have anything like that. I think tautology allocation tends to be relatively small. I understand it because it takes time and space. But on Cephia, my test machine is running 500 million allocations. Sorry, 500 million independent extents. Which could actually be billions of allocations, but there are some disjoints.
How long does it take to do that, Gabby?
Tautology. If I want to add test, who should I talk to?
Josh, are you still running your tautology like meetings? I think you were at one point, right?
Yeah, those are Mondays and Wednesdays. So, Gabby, maybe we can talk about that at the Monday tautology meeting.
Okay.
Cool. All right. Anyone have anything else they want to talk about this week? If there's nothing else, then we'll end a little early and can get ready for their long weekend here, or at least the people at Red Hat. All right. Well then, I will see you next week, guys. Have a great day. Have a great weekend. Bye.
Thank you, guys. See you next week.
Thank you. Thanks. Good weekend.